Hey guys, my name is Matthew. Today we're talking about what makes The Cat in the Hat so great. Let's get right into it. When you ask people what makes The Cat in the Hat so great, so often they jump straight to the simplistic language. And that's true to an extent. Simplistic language is really important for helping kids to learn how to read and to learn language and things like that. But that simplistic language is actually based on a list of 350 words that all early reading primers were using during the time that Dr. Seuss was creating his book. In fact, it's a specific list of 350 words that publishers were primarily using in these early reading primers. What is it about The Cat in the Hat that sticks out from its time period and has become a classic that is continued to be read from today? It has so much more to do with than just that. In this video, we're going to be looking at the 5 things that make The Cat in the Hat great, or another title for this might be the 5 things that your early reading primer should have if you want it to be helpful for both toddlers and early readers to be able to learn language and learn to read. The first thing that Dr. Seuss does so well in all of his books, but this is so especially true in Cat in the Hat, is the rhyming element. Now, rhymes are really, really important for both language and for reading. Rhyming actually helps build up in toddlers something called phonological awareness, or the awareness of the 14 vowel sounds that exist in our language. There are about 14. People think 5. It's actually more like 14 in the English language, or maybe 15 depending on how you count them. And so it's really important that kids start to hear those things and understand how they correlate to other words. And so rhyming is an incredibly important part of both learning how to speak English. So it's important for toddlers and babies to be able to hear this rhyme scheme that happens throughout all of Dr. Seuss's books, but also it's important for young readers to learn how to read and recognize vowel sounds as they show up in different words. This is the reason that all of our nursery rhymes have rhymes in them, and early learning songs, things like the Hokey Pokey, they have so many rhymes in them is because it's actually incredibly important for developing the right ear and eventually learning how to read as well. One thing that Dr. Seuss does really, really well in this is the rhymes are varied and interesting. That is to say, he doesn't use the same basic rhyme scheme throughout his book that develops this very specific pattern that so many other books do. It's not just A, B, and then that pattern is repeated throughout the book. It's sometimes A, B, but oftentimes it's A, B, C, B, and A, B, C, B, C, or something like that. He varies it, he adds repetition and differing rhymes throughout the book, so it's not all the same exact rhyme. That's really helpful to be able to hear those rhymes in different ways, put out in different places, but still done well. But a lot of books rhyme, a lot of early learning materials rhyme. What is another element that really sets Dr. Seuss apart from your average reading primer? One of the most important elements to Dr. Seuss's books, and The Cat in the Hat in particular, is the cadence. The cadence is a fancy word for rhythm, and in the case of Dr. Seuss, he uses maybe the most important cadence of all throughout almost all of his books. It's called iambic pentameter. You may be familiar with that word when you think back to sophomore English class, because Shakespeare wrote almost all of his material, whether you think he's one guy or not, all of Shakespeare's material was written in iambic pentameter. It's a special way that you can write the rhythm of your words. What's really important about iambic pentameter is that the English language is actually heavily reliant on iambic pentameter for you to understand how your words and how your sentences go together. Iambic pentameter is particularly important when listening to this book or other books that use it for newborn babies and toddlers to understand when sentences are starting and when they're finishing. And it helps to start to understand how conversations work and is really key in understanding English language, for example, as opposed to the Romance languages, which use another rhythm, another cadence altogether. When you listen to Italian, French, or Spanish, you can tell that their sentences sound different because they actually use a different rhythm and they sound much different than English does. Dr. Seuss, similarly, like I said, to Shakespeare, uses iambic pentameter consistently throughout his books to really help children to understand how language works and how words are formed. Now, these elements are important and vital for helping to understand how language works, but what I really love about Dr. Seuss's content is that it is fun. Consistently throughout his content, he builds sentence structure and concepts in a fun way, but he also talks about fun ideas at the same time. This builds interest, and instead of reading a boring block of text, the text is varied and situated differently across the page, and all the content is focused on the idea of fun. Reading is meant to be fun. I love in The Cat in the Hat the line, "Look at me, look at me, look at me now." It's fun to have fun, but you have to know how. It builds in so many of the elements we've already talked about. There's a beautiful rhyme there. There's repetition, which is wonderful for early learners, as we know. But also, it lets us know this book is meant to be fun. It's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's supposed to be just a fun thing that we can read out loud, and my children love it when I read Dr. Seuss out loud to them. But also, it's a fun thing to read. It lets you know that, hey, it's okay for me to enjoy this book. This isn't boring and stuffy. I'm not learning how to read because I have to, but instead you're learning how to read because I actually want to. It's enjoyable. I love how fun Dr. Seuss's content is, and it's a really key idea in early learning primer books that your content should be fun. Another thing that makes The Cat in the Hat great, and all of Dr. Seuss's books are similar in this way, are the illustrations. The illustrations, not only are they fun and energetic and bright colors and interesting concepts that are fun to look at, but also they help build the story in a way that others don't. For instance, in The Cat in the Hat, I love the way that Dr. Seuss describes the scene surrounding the Cat in the Hat picking up the house at the end of the day. The narrator, the little boy in the story, tells us that the Cat in the Hat comes in and picks up the toys. And that's not very exciting, obviously. The narration itself is actually a little bit bland here, but where he loses the interest from the narration, Dr. Seuss picks it up with the illustration. Because the cat has returned to the house, he's not just picking up the toys, instead he's in this giant red machine, some motorized vehicle, and it's got arms going off all over the place, and it's picking everything up and putting it back where it belongs. And the illustrations actually carry the story here in a way that the words just couldn't do. It would be really difficult to describe the picture that's going on there. And so instead of trying to use just the words, which are important for a Dr. Seuss book, he also uses his illustrations. And this is done consistently throughout all of Dr. Seuss's books. The Cat in the Hat is no exception. Lastly, I don't want to down on the word choice because Dr. Seuss's word choice is actually really, really important. I told you at the beginning of this video that he was working off a list of 350 words. 350 words that were like part of the curriculum for schools, and that's what early reading books were meant to use. Dr. Seuss does something that I think is really important, though. He takes very simple words, which are good and they're important for learning how to read. We know that 80% of our language is used by only 20% of our words. There's only about 500 words that we use almost all the time. And so if we can just learn those words, the rest of it starts to come later. So this use of simplistic language is really important, but Dr. Seuss does something even better. He makes words up. Now for children, and whether they're toddlers or even as they're starting to read, they know that words like thneed or glumpity glump, those aren't real words. They're aware of that. They don't hear them used anywhere else but in these books, and so they recognize that they're made up words. And that's really important because children make up words as well. My 4-year-old daughter loves making up words, and that's a good thing. She's learning how language works, and she's experimenting with different sounds. And so the way that he makes up words and uses them in sentences in ways that make sense even though they're made up is actually vital in helping children to understand how our language works. It also helps us to know that it's okay to play with words and to enjoy language and to enjoy reading. There's something fun about making up new words and imagining new ways that things can go together. And Dr. Seuss really exudes that through his simplistic word choice combined with his made up words. I absolutely love doing some of the research that I did on this particular video. I'm going to drop a bunch of links in the bottom. If you're interested at all in early childhood reading and language development, there are tons of interesting studies, including newborns somehow picking Dr. Seuss over other books. Feel free to look around in those links because they're really interesting. Also, the story of how Dr. Seuss created Cat in the Hat is quite fascinating as well. I'll drop a link to one of those stories. Let me know in the comments, why do you think The Cat in the Hat is so great? What is it about it that you loved? What is it about it that you remember well? And what is it about it that you think makes it stand out as a classic? If you enjoyed this content, feel free to like and subscribe, and as always, stay safe out there.